so that you can log into the control panel if you want to?
I didn't, but that's okay. I'm not in a place where I can do that.
No worries. Great. All right, we'll have some folks live in just a few seconds here. And I can say CWA New Jersey membership. That's good enough, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. All right, welcome to our live CWA New Jersey membership telephone town hall meeting. Thank you for being on with us. We'll be joined in a moment here by Seth Hahn, Legislative and Political Director for CWA New Jersey. We'll be going through a 5-point agenda. We'll be talking about Governor Christie's proposal to cut pension payments. Then we'll talk about our lawsuit fighting it. We'll talk about how the PERS trustees voted to join our lawsuit this morning. And we'll talk about Senate President Sweeney announcing the plan he wants the Democratic legislature to pass. And then we'll go over what we have to do now. And finally, we'll take some live questions from our membership out there in the audience. Now, if you'd like to ask a question live in this forum after we get through our 5-point agenda, please push 0 on your phone right now or at any time during this call. We'll get you up in line to ask those questions live, and we'll do some Q&A at the very end. So I'm going to go through this introduction just a couple more times, and then we'll go ahead and turn it over to Seth to get the call started. Again, you're on with CWA New Jersey membership. This is a live telephone town hall meeting. We have Seth Hahn, the Legislative and Political Director for CWA New Jersey, on the phone. He's going to go through a 5-point agenda, and we'll take some live questions after that. If you want to ask a question, push 0 on your phone right now. Now, our agenda is going to cover Governor Christie's proposal to cut pension payments. Then we'll go over our lawsuit fighting it. We'll talk about how the PERS trustees voted to join our lawsuit this morning. And we'll also cover Senate President Sweeney's announced plan for how he wants the Democratic legislature to pass. We'll go over what we have to do now after that, and then we'll take your live questions. So once more, if you would like to ask a question live in this forum, please push 0 on your phone now or at any time. We'll get your question up, and we'll take a few of those live at the end of our agenda. And one more mention, we'll also have a few survey questions that you can vote in using your touch-tone phone, so stick around for those. And that's the basic outline of our call. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Seth Hahn, our Legislative and Political Director, to take it from here. Seth, go ahead.
All right, brothers and sisters, thanks for joining the call. We've got some very important business here in front of us, in front of the state legislature, trying to protect our pension and get the governor and the state legislature to do the right thing and put the money into the pension. I'll remind everyone here to press 0 if you have a question, and we will take some live questions at the end of the call. So first, I just want to make sure that we update everyone on the call with the details of Chris Christie's plan and how we got here. So in short, there's a shortfall in this year's budget revenue and that's because the revenues of New Jersey are not growing. It's not because we've increased spending. We haven't. It's simply because revenues are not increasing at a pace fast enough. And revenues aren't growing because Chris Christie has employed trickle-down economics, giving billions in corporate welfare, massive tax breaks for corporations and the wealthy, and then cutting services. Now, we know that trickle-down economics doesn't work. Trickle-down economics is the theory that if you just give the wealthy enough income, that they will spend their money and it will trickle down to benefit the rest of our society. But we actually know that what you really should do is make sure the middle class and the poor people can afford to spend what they need to spend, and that generally they spend most, if not all, of their income, and they spend it on things that will get people back to work, and they spend it on things in our local neighborhoods. So trickle-down economics has never worked, and it didn't work here in New Jersey when Chris Christie tried it. New Jersey is 48th in private sector job growth under Chris Christie, and New Jersey has recovered only half the jobs it lost during the recession, even though neighboring states like New York have recovered more than all of the jobs they lost during the recession. So now I want people to remember the Pension and Benefit Reform Law in 2011. That's the law that stripped public workers of our ability to negotiate over health benefits. It increased the costs that we pay for health benefits and forced us to pay more for a less generous pension. That law said that the state had to get back on track to full pension payments. You know, recent governors, starting under Christie Whitman, have skipped all or part of the pension payments. That law said the state has to get back on track to full pension payments, and they gave themselves 7 years to get there. So in the first year of that schedule, they made a 1/7 of a full payment. In the second year, 2/7, and in this fiscal year, it was 3/7. Now that 3/7 of a full payment amounted to about $1.6 billion. The legislature funded it in this year's budget, and Chris Christie signed that budget into law. But that Pension and Benefits Reform Law, now that law went further. It said that not only does the state have to pay that, but that workers have a contractual right to full funding of that pension. So that brings us to this year. And there was a budget shortfall of this year of about $600 million or so. And instead of dealing with that, Governor Christie just decided that he would balance the $600 million shortfall by not making the full required pension payment. But it's more than that. There was a $600 million shortfall, and he said that he would skip $900 million in pension payments. This would give him an additional couple $100 million heading into the next fiscal year. So why would he do that? Well, there are a number of reasons, but what he has said was that he was only going to pay the normal cost, the normal contribution part of the pension payment moving forward, and not the unfunded liability. So what does that mean? There are two parts of the pension payment under the Pension and Benefit Reform Law of 2011. One is the normal contribution. That's the amount the state normally owes to meet the benefit levels we'll need to fund pensions in the future. The other is the unfunded liability. That's the part that the state owes because of years of skipped pension payments going back to the Whitman administration. Christie said he wouldn't, and these were his words, he wouldn't pay for, quote, the sins of the past, and he was saying that the state was off the hook for those years of skipped payments, even though the law he signed in 2011 says otherwise. So Christie said that in fiscal year 14, which ends on June 30th of this month, he would make a $696 million payment for the normal contribution, but he would not pay the unfunded liability portion, which is an additional $887 million. And he didn't stop in fiscal year 14. For the next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 15, which begins on July 1st, the Pension and Benefit Reform Law said that the state owed about $2.25 billion. Of that, the normal contribution is $681 million, and the unfunded liability is $1.6 billion. So Christie just announced that he was going to skip that unfunded liability payment of $1.6 billion. So now if you add those two payments up, the one from fiscal 14 and fiscal 15, you get nearly $2.5 billion of payments that Chris Christie has announced he's not going to fund into the pension. So that gets us to our lawsuit. Real quick, I do want to mention to folks that we will take questions at the end of this call. You can press 0 to get lined up to ask questions at the end of this call. So since Christie unilaterally announced that he was just not going to fund the pension in violation of the law that he signed, we are suing the state. We have joined with 13 other unions. Our lawsuit points out that the Pension and Benefits Reform Law gives workers that contractual right to the pension funding. And it also points out that Chris Christie is unilaterally trying to bankrupt the pension system and force cuts. Or, as his treasurer has mentioned, they want to move to a 401k type plan that doesn't guarantee benefit levels for pensioners. All of the union lawsuits have been joined together, and we have applied for a preliminary injunction. We've done that to try to get a ruling on our lawsuit before the budget is due on June 30th. So that hearing will be on June 25th in the Mercer County Courthouse. We'll give you details later, but we need to flood that courthouse with CWA members and retirees wearing red on the 25th. We hope that on June 25th, the judge will see the legislature is trying to make the full required payments under the pension and benefits law and order the legislature to make that full required payment for next year's budget. And we also want the judge to require Christie to put all of the unused funds into the pension payment for this year rather than giving himself that surplus of a couple $100 million we talked about earlier. So that's where we got. That was the whole situation up until today. I'll remind folks again to press 0 if you would like to ask a question, and we can get to questions at the end of this. So that's where things stood today, and there were two pretty exciting developments today. To talk about the first one here from Local 1032, the president of Local 1032 is Patrick Kavanaugh.
Thanks, Seth, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking some time to get on this call. I just want to give folks an update on really what was a pretty exciting development this morning. I think probably everybody on this call over the last week and a half or so has heard that one piece of our strategy was, in addition to filing our own lawsuit and in addition to having phone calls to legislators, we wanted to make sure that the boards that are responsible for financial oversight of these pension funds actually did the right thing and took action themselves. And so we started a campaign to generate letters from PERS members, people who are enrolled in the Public Employee Retirement System, which is virtually all CWA members with a few exceptions, as well as many, many other public sector unions. And we wanted members to make very clear to their representatives on the Board of Trustees and to the Board of Trustees as a whole that we expect them to do everything that's within their power to make sure that the guidelines set forth in Chapter 78 for full funding are followed. And so over the last week and a half, we generated over 10,000 letters, thanks to the work of all of you on this call and shop stewards in their work sites going desk to desk and talking to people and making sure that people understood how important this was. We actually had 10,000 letters that we delivered today to the PERS Board of Trustees meeting that said that these members wanted that board, their representatives on that board who have a responsibility to the oversight of the system, to take independent legal action and sue the state in order to enforce the provisions of Chapter 78 that require full funding in accordance with what Seth laid out before. And, you know, we've worked very, very hard over the years to make sure that we have union people and union voices on the PERS board, and that really paid off today. The PERS board is a 9-member board. It includes 3 state representatives. It includes 2 local government representatives and a county representative. And then there are 2 gubernatorial appointees, and there is a representative from the Treasurer's Office also as a voting member on the board. Just before discussion began this morning, after the 10,000 letters were delivered, both of the gubernatorial appointees and the representative from the Treasurer decided that they were going to recuse themselves. And they stepped out of the room and did not participate in any of the discussion that followed about the responsibility of the PERS Board of Trustees to take action to make sure that full funding for the pension was included in order to be compliant with Chapter 78. And obviously that was amusing on a lot of levels and very troubling at the same time. These are individuals that have a fiduciary responsibility. They're appointed to oversee the health of the system and make sure that the system is healthy, and they opted to walk out of the room and not participate in the discussion and not take any action to enforce and uphold that obligation that they have as trustees. So every member that stayed, including our union representatives, voted 6-0 to take independent legal action, to enforce the provisions of Chapter 78, and I think that was due overwhelmingly to what they saw as an outpouring from each of you demanding that they take that action. And so everybody on this call we thank you. You did a tremendous job in what was a very, very short period of time. And now we have the Board of Trustees of the largest pension system in the state joining us in our legal action going forward, which I think is going to send a very, very strong message. I want to point out that last week, the Board of Trustees of the Police and Fire Retirement System, the PFRS, also passed a resolution and took action to pursue their own independent legal action. So I think we've got a tremendous amount of momentum going into next week. I think we've got to keep the pressure on. I think we have to have a full court press in terms of turnout next week from each of you wearing red on Wednesday to send a message that we are demanding that the state honor its obligations under Chapter 78 for full funding, including both the normal costs and the unfunded liability. And what we saw today was fairly unprecedented, and everybody deserves real credit and thanks for that work. It paid off tremendously. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to Seth to talk a little bit about another important development that happened this afternoon.
Okay, so I will mention again, if folks want to ask a question, you can press 0 you can press 0 now, and an operator is standing by to help you ask your question, and we will take some questions at the end of this call. So the legislature had a choice. They could either go along with Chris Christie and not make the payment, because Christie's budget this year, remember, is not making that full payment, or they could pass a budget that includes the payment and raising taxes if necessary to get that done. So we've been pressuring the legislature to pass a budget that fully funds the pension payment required in fiscal year 15. We've had 2 rallies at the State House. We had a statewide shop stewards meeting last week. We've been making calls to the legislature demanding a full payment. There have been nearly 1,000 phone calls in just 1 week to the legislature. And since then, CWA has led a coalition of public sector unions to demand in unity that the full payment be made in the budget and that Democrats send a budget to Governor Christie that includes a full payment. About a week ago, before we started a lot of our mobilization, there was no consensus among Democrats. The Democrats control the legislature about what to do. But today we got some very, very good news. Steve Sweeney, the president of the state Senate, and Loretta Weinberg, the majority leader, announced that the Senate will pass a budget. They will try to lead the Senate to pass a budget that makes a full pension payment. In order to raise that revenue, they're going to do 3 things. 1, they're going to pass an income tax increase on those making more than $500,000 a year. I doubt that's anyone on this call, but maybe there's a couple of you. 2, they're going to pass an increase in the corporate business tax rate. Corporations will receive more than $650 million in tax cuts in this budget, and this tax increase would recoup about $375 million of that corporate tax cut. And 3, they're going to pass a freeze in all corporate handouts from what's known as the Business Employment Incentive Program, or we call it the BEEP. The BEEP give grants or tax incentives, mostly to large, profitable corporations, and corporations have seen a record growth in these handouts from the Christie administration, almost $4 billion since he was elected. So the Democrats want to freeze some of those payments, and they're going to add all of these together. The increase on the income tax of people making more than $500,000 a year, the increase on the corporate business tax cuts, and the freeze of giving out those corporate incentives under the BEEP, and they're going to take that money and they're going to make the pension payment next year, the full payment required by Chapter 78 that Patrick was talking about. So in a minute, we're going to ask you what you think about this. So I just real quickly again, I want to review the Senate, the plan that the Senate Democratic leadership, Steve Sweeney and Loretta Weinberg, announced today. In order to make the full pension payment required by law in the fiscal year 15 budget, which starts July 1st, they're going to pass a tax increase on income more than $500,000 a year. an increase in the corporate business tax, and they're going to freeze grants being made under the BEAP. So we're going to ask our first poll question here, and we'll tell you what to press here. So our question is, do you think that CWA should support the Democratic Senate plan to fully fund the pension, and ask the Democrats in the Assembly to adopt this plan? So I guess on your touch-tone phone, press 1 if you like this plan and you think we should support it, or press 2 if you don't like this plan and you don't think that we should support it. Either you don't think it goes far enough, or you don't think we should raise taxes right now on the wealthier corporations. So again, press 1 if you like that plan and you think that CWA should support it, and ask the legislature and the Assembly to adopt that plan. And press 2 if you don't like that plan and think we need to go back to the drawing board. And how long do we leave that poll question open, folks? Okay, I'll report on the results of that plan, I guess, just right now. So get your vote in here. Okay, so of people answering the poll question, 97% of you like this plan. They think that we should push the Democrats to pass it, and that we should push the Democrats in the Assembly to adopt it. And 3% of you do not like that plan and don't think that we should support it. So I think that's a pretty clear mandate for what we need to do, and to talk about what we need to do in the next couple weeks here. And so I'm gonna just go on to our last agenda item here before we get to some questions, and we will have one more poll question. So it's what do we do now? So tomorrow in Trenton, we're having a lobby day. The Senate is in session, and we will have CWA members and staff and stewards at the State House, and we're going to be lobbying the Senate to support Senate President Sweeney and Majority Leader Weinberg's plan to make the full contribution. There's going to be another lobby day on Monday the 23rd. On Monday, we think that both the committees of the Senate and the Assembly, both budget committees, will vote those budgets out of committee. We want to be there and supporting that plan if it's a good one, and opposing it if for some reason they renege and go to a bad plan. On Wednesday, March 25th, we want to flood the Mercer County Courthouse to support our lawsuit. The Mercer County Courthouse is on East State Street in Trenton. I don't have the exact address, but it's in Trenton. That lawsuit is at 2 p.m. There will be more details coming from your locals, or check back at cwanj.org for the details. But that lawsuit is due to be heard at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, March 25th at the Mercer County Courthouse in Trenton. We want to be there. We're going to have another Teletown conference call at the same time a week from today, Wednesday, March 25th at 6 p.m. to update you further about our plans and what's happening. And on Thursday, March 26th, we expect the budgets to be voted on in front of the full legislature, both the Senate and the Assembly. We hope that we can get the Democrats to pass a budget that includes that full payment. And if we're successful, we'll do everything we can to try to get Chris Christie to sign it. We are having phone banks to retirees every day and all active members every night, encouraging all CWA members to call their legislators and demand that full payment. So if you get a call from people at our phone banks, please cooperate with them and make the call to your legislators even if you already have. We also have a phone number to help you make calls to your legislator in case you don't know who your state legislators are or what their phone numbers are. I'm going to give you that number. I'll give it to you a couple times, but you can write it down now. That number is 888-598-0116. Again, that's 888-598-0116. We're going to ask you to make those calls and to go to your work sites tomorrow and ask everyone there to make the call as well. You call that number, you simply punch in your zip code and choose whether or not you want to be connected to your senator, your state senator, or either of your assembly members. Since you have one state senator and 2 state assembly members, you need to call that number 3 times. Again, that's 888-598-0116 to be connected to your legislators to demand they pass a budget with the full required pension payment. All right, before we go to questions, I want to ask one more poll question, and that is whether or not we can count on you, everybody on this call, to make all 3 calls to your legislator, starting since we don't know yet if the Assembly is going to adopt the Senate plan to fully fund the pension. Let's start with both of your Assembly members as soon as you can. So we're going to ask you, 1 is yes, I will make all 3 calls tonight. 2 is yes, I will make all 3 calls tomorrow. Number 3 is I'll make all 3 calls and I'll bring the 800 number to work with me and get my coworkers to do it tomorrow. And number 4 is no, you don't plan on making the calls. Again, 1 is yes, you'll make the call as soon as we get off this phone. 2 is you'll make the calls tomorrow. 3 is you'll make the calls and you'll bring that number to work tomorrow with you and get all of your coworkers to make that call. And 4 is no, you're not going to make a phone call. All right, we will get to questions in a second, but first I want to give a shout out to the members of Local 1032 who are in the room next to me making phone calls to members tonight and asking them to call their legislators, and they have taken a break to listen to this call. They're doing a great job in there, and we will be in Trenton until this budget is passed, and we hope to see a lot more folks down here helping them out. Okay, so we're about to start taking questions. Just so you know, if we can't get to your question tonight, you can still ask a question. You will be prompted at the end of this call to record your question. Please remember to leave your name, phone or email, and your local number so we can get back to you. Again, your name, your local, and your phone or email. And just so people know what the results of that last question were, 19% of you said, yes, I'm going to make all 3 calls tonight. 34% of you said you're going to make the calls tomorrow. 39% said you're going to make the calls and you're going to bring that number to work with you tomorrow, which is, again, 888-598-0116. And 7% said you are not going to make the call to your legislator. Okay, so I think we will kick it over to our first question of the evening.
Yep, we've got Vince on the line for you. Vince, you're live. Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually have 2 questions. I'll ask the first one, which is, it's my understanding that the state constitution says that Christie has to present, he has to balance the budget and gives him the power to reallocate funds. This seems contradictory to Chapter 78. So realistically, what are our chances in court regarding that? Since on the one hand, we've got the state constitution guaranteeing him or telling him he's got to balance the budget and allowing him to make whatever changes or reallocate funds as he sees fit to balance the budget.
Okay, so the question is about the budget. On one hand, there's a requirement in the Constitution that the governor submit a balanced budget, and on the other, there's language in this Chapter 78 that guarantees a contractual right to the full funding of that pension. I would say the governor's way of balancing the budget is to propose simply not paying the bills. We believe that's illegal, and that's why we're going into court. We believe that the better way to balance the budget is to actually pay our bills. And so we are pushing the Democrats to push a plan that actually will pay our bills. And I mean, you never know exactly what's going to happen, but we believe we've got a strong lawsuit, and we believe that if the Democrats are pushing a budget plan that pays our bills, that we'll put that lawsuit in the strongest position possible. I don't know, Patrick, you got anything to add there?
I would just add that, I think what we heard today from the leadership in the Senate is what we wanted to hear, right? That they have a plan to raise revenue in fiscal year 2015 to make sure that the full required pension payment is made. And as far as 2014 goes, as Seth said earlier, not only is he trying to take enough to plug the hole that, let's be honest, he created with his completely warped revenue numbers for this year, but he's even just trying to take an additional $300 million from the required pension payment too. And one of the other things that we think is a real strength of our lawsuit is that the way that he did that was he issued an executive order making that cut. And we don't think that he has the authority to change an appropriation. Don't forget, this is a budget that was already passed and signed into law, that he has the authority to change an appropriation through an executive order. So I think what's before us now is just making sure that the Democrats and the legislature hear from us loud and clear that we want them to go forward with this plan for 15.
Excellent.
Okay, we'll take a few more questions here. I see here that a couple of people are asking questions about some of the dates I went over, so let me just review those. Tomorrow, the 19th, we have some folks coming to Trenton to lobby their senators. On Monday, the 23rd, we're going to have a much larger lobby day. You should all contact your local for details about that, to find out where we're meeting and what the plan is and all that stuff. But on Monday, the budget will move through the Assembly and Senate committees, so we want to have a strong presence there that day. On Wednesday, the 25th, is that court hearing at the Mercer County Courthouse at 2 p.m. We're going to do another Teletown Hall update at 6 p.m. on the 25th. And then on the 26th, which is next Thursday, we expect that the budget will be voted on. We hope that the Democrats will be passing a budget that includes full funding. And if so, we will be there to support that budget as long as it does so in a responsible way. And if it does not, we'll be there to oppose it. So those are some of the big days coming up. And then, from there we'll have to figure out how much pressure we can put on Chris Christie to sign a responsible budget should the Democrats pass it. We'll go on to the next question now.
Yep, we've got Troy up next. Troy, go ahead.
Hi. As I was listening to you, the monies that were supposed to be reinstated into our pension plan, do we know what Chris Christie has done with the money, or has he given it to a private sector? How would we know where that money has actually gone to?
Okay, so let me answer that. I'll give you a couple. Give you sort of a comprehensive answer here. One is that at the beginning of this fiscal year, the Democrats and Chris Christie passed a budget. They thought there would be so much money in that budget. They thought there would be, X amount of dollars. Now they came around to May of this year, and they realized that they were wrong and that there was actually not that much money in there, and that they were nearly $1 billion short of where they thought they were going to be. Now, as Patrick mentioned earlier, part of that was because, remember, last year was an election year, and they all wanted to talk about how great they had done and how they were growing revenues and how we could afford to pay things. And, Chris Christie was going around saying we were having the Jersey comeback and we were growing jobs and revenues. So part of it was Part of it could have been that they were just wrong, but certainly a large part of it was politics that led them to overestimate how much revenue they had at the beginning of last year. So then the end of the fiscal year comes around, and they are very short on revenue, and they have to pick a place because the state constitution requires that the budget be balanced. They've got to pick a place to slash revenues at the end of the year. Now, Governor Christie did cut some allocations to certain departments and certain places, but the biggest part of where he decided to slash that revenue at the end of the year was on our pension payment. The other thing I would say is that some people say we just can't afford these things and we just don't have the revenue. Well, that's not true. This governor has handed out more than $4 billion in incentives and grants and loopholes to corporations since he became governor. In the fiscal year 15 budget, he is proposing $650 million in tax cuts for corporations since when he took over. He has refused to sign into law a tax on millionaires and the wealthiest who can most afford it. And he's really done everything he can to limit those revenues. So on one hand, he has done everything he can to slash the revenue coming into the state, and on the other, he says we don't have the money to pay our bills. So, part of it is very manufactured, and some of it is just the revenue projections are off from year to year. But most of this is politics. Most of it has been very much a manufactured crisis. Patrick, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's it. Yep.
Okay. We'll take. We have people starting to drop off the call here. We'll take one more question, and then we'll leave you. And there will be another call, same time, same place next week. We'll take one more question.
Yeah, we got Tracy next. Tracy, go ahead.
Yes, hi. My question to you is, I heard you mention that Chris Christie plans on doing away with the pension and starting a 401k. Does that mean that we're going to be a privatized entity now? I mean, how is that going to go? Because I've never heard of a state agency with a 401k and not a pension.
Okay, so to answer that, it would not affect the status of workers, whether they were private or public sector workers. This does not mean that Chris Christie would try to privatize a whole bunch of services. What it does mean is that they would change the pension plan for retirees. So right now, public workers in the PERS plan and many public workers in other plans in New Jersey have what's called the defined benefit pension. That means you pay into it and then you get a certain amount of benefit every year or every month or so for the rest of your life. A 401k plan means you pay into it, and if the market does well, you get a large retirement, and if the market does poorly, you get a not so good retirement, and you're sort of at the mercy of whether the market has done well and whether people have matched enough with your 401k and things like that. There are several states. What the Christie's treasurer has talked about is there are several states that have gone to a hybrid system. So depending on how much time you have into the state, you would get most of your defined benefit plan value for that time, and then moving forward, they would move you onto a 401k plan, which generally, in almost every case, is less generous. So the further away you were from retirement, essentially, the more they would cut your pension value. And again, this is just if Chris Christie gets his way. The Democrats in the legislature would have to go along with that and sign that. There's certainly no indication yet that they're doing that. In fact, the indication from Senate President Sweeney and Majority Leader Weinberg today is that they're going to do the opposite of that. So, I will say that I do think that we've got some major battles ahead of us in trying to ensure that the legislature and the governor, whoever it is, whether it's Chris Christie or the next governor, fully fund our pension so that that system remains solvent and healthy. Patrick, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I would just add that, this is not the first time that we've heard about the possibility of a proposal or somebody saying that they want to change the pension plan for public employees in New Jersey from a defined benefit to a defined contribution 401k model, right? And I think we just have to understand that, we have to be ready to fight to protect our pension plan at every stage, right? This is obviously right now we're in a fight for funding. On the same day that the treasurer submitted a revised budget proposal for fiscal year 2015, he started to float again this familiar idea of changing the structure of the plan. And it's about changing the discussion. It's about creating confusion. We have to be sure that we're ready at every level to fight to protect our pension and our retirement security. Right now, that fight is over funding. Down the road, it could be about the very structure of our plan. But again, this is the governor. He enjoyed an 18-month victory lap saying that everything he did in 2011 saved the pension system. He tried to build his national reputation on that. And here we are today, again, in a fight to protect our pension and our retirement security. And I just don't think we can lose sight of that today, over the next 2 weeks, and then certainly going forward as he's going to continue to try to make changes to the pension system. We have to be prepared for that, and we have to be prepared to do whatever is necessary to protect the benefits that we have fought for and that we, that we have earned during our working lives.
Okay, with that, folks, we will say goodbye until next week, same time, same place. You can contact your local to get more details on our mobilization activities. We will try to put a recording of this call up on www.cwanj.org for you to listen to or to show to your coworkers. Again, if you're still in the queue to ask a question, please stay on the line and remember to leave your name, local, or phone or email, and you can ask your question. We'll do our best to get to every question we get.